Today we're going to talk about king snakes and how we set up their lighting. King snakes in previous years have suffered from outdated beliefs, thinking that we can shove them in trays and racks without any lights, when in fact these animals do bask regularly in the wild. So what we want to do is try to give them that opportunity to bask in sunshine, air quote sunshine, in our enclosures. Not only does that allow them to build up vitamin D in their skin through UVB and the hormonal cycles that causes, but also to warm up and get all that infrared from the sunshine. Our king snakes do like things quite cool, anywhere from sort of 68 to 78 during the day is perfectly acceptable. Going above these air temperatures won't necessarily kill our king snakes, but our king snakes do start to get just that bit uncomfortable. I find that mine start seeking their humid hides and anywhere that they can get to a cool microclimate. There are king snake keepers that do just keep them in tubs and keep them in a room and then heat that room to 73 degrees. However, I don't agree with that because I need to thermoregulate and I'll have choice in their lives just like they would in the wild. They'll be able to move into the sunshine or go into the shade or go under a rock where it's cool and moist. The wild is very varied and they have a lot of agency in their lives to make decisions about what they want at any particular time in the day. But the point I'm making is that king snakes can exist and do breed and eat and defecate at 73 degrees. So as long as we stay within this ballpark of air temperatures, they will do absolutely fine. So knowing that means that we can look at our basking spot entirely differently. There are a lot of keepers that will dial in things and start looking at surface temperatures and really trying to fine tune things to a certain care guide's parameters. But for beginners, I'm going to simplify this right down for you. What we want to do is give our king snakes one little patch of sunshine and one little patch of shade. We divide the enclosure in halves so they can move in and out of areas and regulate themselves when they need to. So starting off with heat and infrared, we want to get a nice solid heat lamp and plonk that on one side of our enclosure. What that's going to do is project the infrared down at a certain spot, the lovely rich radiation that is similar to what comes from the sun. This is that tingly feeling when you step out into the sun and your skin starts to tingle. That's the infrared. You will feel the difference between putting your hand just near to a warm object in your house versus sunshine. It does feel different, and that's the difference between just giving them a heat mat and giving them a proper basking lamp. So we can have that basking lamp on, and as long as our air temperatures in the enclosure aren't exceeding a certain value, then we know it's safe. For example, if you put a thermometer in the cool, shaded end of your enclosure and it doesn't exceed an upper limit that you set, let's say we don't want the air temperature in our enclosure getting above 80 degrees. As long as the air temperatures don't exceed that, it doesn't really matter too much because the animal can come out of that heat and into the shade. King snakes don't need anything blisteringly hot like a bearded dragon or a Eurymastix or anything like that. They just want a nice gentle warmth. So if you put your hand underneath that heat lamp and it's a nice gentle warmth and your air temperatures are within the parameters and the boundaries that I've mentioned previously, then you're pretty much good to go. What I would say is to use a temperature gun. Many of you during the pandemic were used to these temperature guns and people measuring the temperature of a forehead. It's the same thing, but we use it in the reptile industry. You want to point that at the ground beneath your heat lamp just to make sure it's not getting too hot. Again, the king snakes can actually use this hot surface beneath the basking spot to warm their tummies and to actually warm up. So they can use both the radiation hitting their backs, but also the surface beneath them to warm up. As an extreme upper limit, I wouldn't really want to let those temperatures get above, say, sort of 95. And if you're finding that happens regularly, what I would do is take the wattage of the bulb that you've picked and go down a wattage. So if you've picked a 100 watt lamp, go down to a 50 watt heat lamp. As long as those air temperatures in the environment are the same, because a king snake can exist and breed and defecate and live at those temperatures, what you're adding is supplemental for them to use. So as long as you're not over providing, you can't really get it wrong. The thing that's really important to use for a safety measure is a thermostat. Now, a thermostat is simply something that controls the output of your lamp based upon a temperature it reads in your environment. So what you'll do is you'll take your thermostat, plug your heat lamp into the thermostat. Then what you'll do is place the thermostat probe into your enclosure, and whatever temperature that probe reaches, it will either increase or decrease power to your heat lamp. So what I would actually do is place that probe in the shaded end, sort of midway up, not touching anything in the air, so it's not getting lights upon it and it's not touching something warm. What it's actually getting is a true reading of that air temperature. As soon as the lights are on it, it actually heats it up and makes it a higher reading than the air temperature actually is. So make sure that's in the shaded end. And I would set the thermostat to something like 80 as an uncomfortable cool end temperature. If the temperatures ever reach that hot temperature, then what it would do was dim and turn off your heat lamp. So I'm using that as a safety feature so that it pops in and turns off your heat lamp should there be a heat wave or anything like that. But for the most part, you shouldn't actually need that to control your heat lamp because you should be using a sensible wattage. That means that at full power of that lamp, things aren't getting too hot. Now we've talked about giving them a sunshine patch and a shade patch. This is really important when it comes to talking with UV. Now, I think UVB is really important for king snakes. Not only can they see into the ultraviolet spectrum, but it's really good for their skin, their health, their circadian rhythms, their mental health especially, which many people don't talk about, but it's very, very important. So what I would use is something like a Zoomid 5.0 or an Arcadia Shade Dweller, something that is quite low output. Put that on the same side as you've got your heat bulb so that you have that matching patch of sunshine and have that no more than coming across to halfway of the enclosure. When you have that on, that means they're going to have their patch of sunshine, and if they don't want to be on it and they want to cool down or escape the light, they can move to the shade, just like the wild. Now, the way that we measure UVB output is expressed as the ultraviolet indices. This is basically the measuring scale for the output of UVB. To avoid overcomplicating this, we won't go much further into that. If you want to know more about UVB and how to pick the right bulb and percentages and UVI, then we have a complete guide on this channel. But for the most part, if you choose one or two of those bulbs that I've just chosen for you, you're unlikely to overexpose your snake. For a little bit of reassurance, king snakes will bask at much higher UVIs in the wild than people think. For example, this king snake was found by Cedric from Chief Sweets Universe. Shout out to Cedric. This king snake was found openly basking at a UVI of 4. What I'm trying to give you is probably a UVI of around 1. To build up their vitamin D and to have the effects they have, it's simply a case of exposure to UVB and their skin getting warm enough. When you've given them that heat lamp, that's going to happen, and they can sit there for as long or as little as they want because they can move off into the shade. But I can tell you from experience of having these king snakes behind me, they have massive enclosures, massive opportunity to get away from their basking spots, but they still stretch out in the sunshine every morning and bask, especially under that UVB. At night time, you can basically just put everything on a wall timer so that both your heat lamp and your UVB goes off at night and they have their nighttime period. Nighttime air temperatures can go down to as low as 60 during times outside of hibernation, and I would be completely comfortable with it. So unless your house is super, super cold, you can just turn things off at night. If you're just looking to research and get into king snakes, or you already have one, then I really recommend watching this care guide right here.